Did you know that the legendary swords of the Vikings may not be as superior as you think? In this video, we'll explore the fascinating truth behind Viking sword making, the myths surrounding their legendary blades, and what really set them apart from other cultures. Get ready to discover the secrets of Viking craftsmanship, what influenced Viking sword designs. The Vikings were not just warriors, they were also keen observers and adapters of the world around them. They drew inspiration from various cultures and technologies, often mixing different styles to create their own unique weapons. One little known fact is that the Vikings had access to high-quality iron from local sources, which was vital for crafting their swords. This high-quality iron was often sourced from bog iron deposits, and it played a crucial role in their weapon making. As the Vikings traveled and raided across Europe, they encountered other cultures, which further influenced their sword designs. They were not isolated. They were part of a broader tapestry of trade and cultural exchange. This cross-pollination of ideas led to innovative designs and features in their swords. You might be surprised to learn that many of the iconic Viking swords, such as the Ulfberht, were a fusion of different techniques and materials, showcasing the adaptability and ingenuity of Viking blacksmiths. The process of crafting these swords was an art form in itself. Understanding the origins of Viking sword making is crucial to appreciating the techniques that went into creating these legendary weapons. You see, every sword tells a story. It's not just a weapon, it's a reflection of the society that made it. The craftsmanship behind each blade was an essential aspect of Viking culture, symbolizing power, status, and skill. The influence of various cultures on Viking sword making is an essential aspect that many people overlook. Most assume that Viking swords were solely the product of Scandinavian ingenuity, but that's far from the truth. The reality is that Viking blacksmiths were skilled in borrowing and adapting techniques from other civilizations, especially those they encountered during their raids and trades. For instance, the use of pattern welding, which involved twisting and layering different types of iron and steel to create intricate patterns, was likely influenced by techniques from the East. This method not only produced beautiful swords, but also enhanced their strength and flexibility. Imagine wielding a sword that's as visually striking as it is deadly. The Viking sword was a testament to the skill and creativity of its maker, merging art with functionality. However, this fascinating journey of sword making was not without its challenges. The early Viking blacksmiths faced various hurdles, from resource availability to technological limitations. They had to be innovative, often experimenting with different materials and techniques to improve their swords. This struggle for perfection adds a layer of complexity to the Viking sword making narrative. Another aspect to consider is the societal influence on sword design. The Vikings were deeply influenced by their hierarchical society. Higher status individuals often had access to better swords, while lower status warriors might have had to make do with simpler weapons. This disparity in sword quality raises questions about the social dynamics within Viking culture. How did access to superior weaponry affect their status on the battlefield? One strange but interesting fact is that Viking swords were often passed down through generations, becoming family heirlooms. This tradition highlights the emotional and cultural significance of these weapons beyond their practical use. Owning a finely crafted sword was a matter of pride and honor, and these blades often carried the legacy of their previous owner. Understanding the origins of Viking sword making not only reveals the craftsmanship involved, but also sheds light on the broader social, cultural, and historical contexts of the Viking age. Each sword was a symbol of the era, representing the conquests, trades, and cultural exchanges that defined Viking society. As we dive deeper into the world of Viking swords, keep in mind that these weapons are more than just steel and iron. They are a reflection of a fascinating culture that thrived on innovation and adaptability. So, as we continue our exploration of Viking swords, remember that the narrative is as rich as the metal from which they were forged. Try to uncover the layers of history, craftsmanship, and the complexities of Viking society as we delve into each aspect of these legendary blades. The world of Viking sword making is filled with surprises, and we've only just begun to scratch the surface. You won't want to miss what comes next as we unravel more about the incredible legacy of Viking craftsmanship. Was iron the ultimate weapon material? This question takes us deep into the heart of Viking sword making and reveals the fundamental role iron played in the creation of their legendary blades. The Vikings were not just fierce warriors, they were also skilled metallurgists who harnessed the power of iron to forge weapons that would shape their destiny. But what made iron so essential, and how did the Vikings become masters at using it? To understand the significance of iron in Viking swords, we first need to look at the material itself. Vikings utilized bog iron, a unique form of iron that was abundant in Scandinavia. This iron was not just any ordinary metal. It was created through a natural process in wetlands, where decaying organic material would produce iron deposits over time. Imagine this: warriors plundering treasures while also digging into the earth to find raw materials for their weapons. They were multitaskers in every sense. Now, here's a strange but fascinating fact. The iron they dug up was often found alongside the remains of animals, which led to some unusual artifacts being discovered. Can you picture a Viking pulling up a sword and finding an old bone next to it? This discovery not only makes you chuckle, but also reminds us of the unpredictable nature of history. But as humorous as that might sound, the implications implications of using bog iron were significant. This type of iron contained impurities, making the smelting process vital to producing high-quality metal. The Vikings mastered the art of smelting, a complex process that involved heating iron ore in a furnace until it melted and separated from impurities. This mastery allowed them to produce strong, durable iron, essential for crafting effective swords. However, the iron alone was not enough. They needed to create steel. To achieve this, they often mixed iron with carbon, which was sourced from various materials, including charcoal made from local trees. The result was a much tougher alloy, leading to blades that could withstand the rigors of battle. Here's where the story gets interesting. Most people think that every Viking sword was forged to perfection, but the reality is a bit more nuanced. The quality of the iron varied greatly, and not all swords were created equal. The skills of the blacksmith and the materials used played crucial roles in the sword's effectiveness. Some swords were crafted for high-ranking warriors, featuring intricate designs and superior materials, while others were more utilitarian, built for everyday soldiers. Understanding the relationship between iron and sword making also reveals deeper insights into Viking society. It wasn't just about the sword itself, it was a reflection of status and wealth. A finely crafted sword made from the best iron was a symbol of power, often passed down through generations. However, many Vikings fought with simpler weapons, highlighting the stark contrast in their society. The irony is that the warriors most celebrated in stories often wielded swords that were much better than what the average fighter could afford. A rare fact that many might find surprising is that not all Vikings were skilled blacksmiths. In fact, some were known to trade for their weapons or raid for them, rather than crafting their own. This raises questions about how much of Viking culture was about personal skill versus the benefits of trade and conquest. The iconic image of a Viking swinging a mighty sword doesn't always account for the teamwork and societal structure behind that blade. As we dig deeper into the role of iron in Viking swords, it's essential to consider the impact of their environment. Scandinavia's geography provided not just resources, but also challenges. The harsh climate and rugged terrain shaped the Vikings into resourceful and adaptable craftsmen. They learned to make the most out of what they had, which often meant using less than perfect materials and honing their techniques to compensate. This adaptation was key to their success in both battle and everyday life. While the Vikings were primarily known for their raiding and warfare, their skills as blacksmiths should not be overlooked. They were pioneers in many respects, pushing the boundaries of what was possible with iron. Their techniques laid the groundwork for future generations of swordsmiths across Europe. The blend of functionality and artistry in their weapons continues to inspire modern blacksmiths and craftsmen. So what does all of this tell us about Viking swords? It reveals a complex interplay between material, technique, and culture. The quality of iron and the skill of the blacksmith were fundamental in shaping the swords that have become legendary. Understanding this relationship enriches our appreciation of Viking craftsmanship and highlights the ingenuity of a civilization that has captivated our imaginations for centuries. As we continue to explore the world of Viking sword making, remember that every blade carries a story of resourcefulness, adaptation, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. The Vikings' mastery of iron was just the beginning, setting the stage for the craftsmanship techniques that would follow. Get ready, because the journey into the art of Viking sword making is only just beginning, and there are many more secrets to uncover. Are Viking swords really as powerful as the legends say? The image of Vikings wielding indestructible swords has been romanticized in countless tales, but the truth behind these legendary blades is more complex than most people realize. Many myths exaggerate the effectiveness of Viking swords, leading to a distorted view of their capabilities. But what does historical evidence reveal about the reality of these weapons? One of the most persistent myths is that Viking swords were unbreakable. Stories often depict these blades as infallible, capable of cleaving through armor and bone with ease. However, the reality is that no sword can withstand every blow, especially in the chaos of battle. In fact, historical evidence shows that many swords experienced wear and tear, with some even breaking during combat. Imagine a Viking warrior in the heat of battle, realizing his sword has shattered. This scenario paints a different picture of Viking warfare, one that is not just about brute strength, but also about skill and strategy. Here's a strange fact that might catch you off guard. Some Viking swords were not even used in battle at all. Instead, they served ceremonial purposes or were passed down as family heirlooms. While warriors often relied on functional weapons, many swords became symbols of status and power rather than instruments of war. This leads us to ask, if not all swords were meant for fighting, how do we determine their true effectiveness? Another intriguing aspect is the variation in sword quality. Not every Viking sword was created equal. Historical records indicate that the quality of swords varied significantly based on the blacksmith's skills, available materials, and the intended use of the weapon. Some blades were crafted with exceptional craftsmanship, utilizing the best iron and advanced techniques, while others were more rudimentary, made from inferior materials. This variation highlights the importance of context in evaluating the effectiveness of these swords. It's essential to consider that the average Viking may not have wielded a legendary blade, but rather a practical weapon made for everyday combat. As we delve deeper into the facts versus myths surrounding Viking swords, it becomes clear that some swords were designed for specific purposes. Certain swords excelled in slashing, while others were better suited for thrusting. The design of a sword could influence how a warrior fought in battle. A little-known fact is that many Viking swords featured a groove running along the blade. This design not only reduced the weight of the sword, but also increased its strength and flexibility. It's fascinating to think that these small details could significantly impact a sword's performance in combat. Now let's address a somewhat controversial point. While many believe that Viking swords were the pinnacle of weapon making, some historians argue that other cultures produced equally impressive swords. For instance, the Roman gladius was designed for thrusting in close combat, proving highly effective in battle. This raises an important question. Were Viking swords truly superior, or were they simply part of a broader array of effective weapons used throughout history? The answer isn't as straightforward as one might think. The legend of the Viking sword has been shaped not just by its physical attributes, but also by the narrative surrounding it. Many stories portray these weapons as enchanted or blessed by gods, adding an element of mystique. Some blades were even inscribed with runes that were believed to invoke protection or enhance the sword's power. These inscriptions were not merely decorative, they reflected the spiritual beliefs of the Viking people. The intertwining of mythology and weaponry adds another layer of complexity to the Viking sword's legacy. As we analyze the reality of Viking swords, it's crucial to consider the broader context of Viking society. The effectiveness of a sword in battle was influenced not just by the weapon itself, but also by the tactics employed by the warriors. Viking combat relied heavily on teamwork, with warriors fighting in formations and using their swords in conjunction with shields. This coordination was essential for maximizing the effectiveness of their weapons. It's a reminder that individual weapons are only part of the equation when it comes to warfare. In summary, the myths surrounding Viking swords often overshadow the more nuanced reality of their effectiveness. While these swords were undoubtedly impressive feats of craftsmanship, they were not invincible. The tales of unbreakable blades and legendary strength have led to a skewed perception of Viking warfare. By understanding the complexities of these weapons, including their variations in quality and intended uses, we can appreciate the artistry and skill behind their creation. As we continue our journey into the world of Viking swords, keep in mind that the truth about these legendary blades is far more fascinating than the myths. In the next section, we'll explore the influence of social status on sword quality and how wealth affected the weaponry of Viking warriors. Get ready to uncover how social hierarchy shaped the swords wielded in battle. Did social status impact sword quality? This question takes us into the heart of Viking society, where status and wealth played critical roles in determining access to the best weaponry. While many envision Vikings as a uniformly fierce group, the reality is that their society was hierarchical, with distinct differences in how swords were valued and wielded by individuals of varying status. But just how deep does this connection go, and what implications did it have for Viking warriors? Higher status Vikings often had access to better swords, reflecting their wealth and influence. Wealthy warriors could commission bespoke blades from master smiths, ensuring they had the finest weapons available. Imagine a Viking lord, adorned in fine armor, wielding a sword that gleams with intricate designs, crafted specifically for him. This disparity raises a fascinating point. If you were a common warrior, how could you compete with such an advantage? A strange fact that many might not know is that the quality of a sword could literally be a matter of life and death. Historical evidence shows that battles were often won or lost based on the effectiveness of weapons, and access to superior swords could tip the scales significantly. Not every Viking wielded a high-quality blade. Most fought with simpler, more utilitarian weapons. The average warrior's sword was often less ornate, reflecting their social status and resources. This contrast highlights the significance of wealth in determining combat effectiveness, raising the question of how much of Viking society was built on this very hierarchy. The social hierarchy influenced the distribution of resources, meaning that those at the top not only enjoyed the best weapons, but also commanded greater respect on the battlefield. This phenomenon is somewhat controversial, as some may argue that skill alone should dictate a warrior's prowess. However, the reality is that social standing often translated into tangible advantages in warfare. A noble warrior, equipped with a finely crafted sword and armor, could inspire fear in his enemies simply by virtue of his status. This disparity in weaponry also led to a culture of envy and competition among warriors. A common soldier might admire and aspire to own a blade as fine as that of his leader, leading to a relentless pursuit of glory and honor on the battlefield. The desire for recognition drove many to prove their worth, sometimes leading to fierce rivalries that fueled the Viking spirit. Imagine the tension between warriors as they strove to gain respect and elevate their status through their deeds in battle. The struggle for recognition was as significant as the battles themselves. A lesser-known fact is that certain swords were even buried with their owners, signifying their status in life and the importance of the weapon in their identity. This practice underscores the cultural significance of swords as not merely tools for combat, but also as symbols of one's life and achievements. When a warrior was laid to rest with a prized sword, it was a statement of their honor and legacy, indicating that status transcended life itself. As we delve deeper, it's important to note that while higher status individuals had better access to swords, this did not guarantee success in battle. Skill, experience, and tactical knowledge played crucial crucial roles in determining the outcome of conflicts. A skilled lower-status warrior might defeat a poorly trained noble simply due to better tactics or luck. This complexity makes Viking warfare intriguing. It was not just about the weapons they wielded, but also about how those weapons were used in the chaos of combat. This social dynamic was particularly pronounced during the Viking raids, where warriors fought not only for glory, but also for riches and status. Success in battle could elevate a common warrior to a higher social standing, allowing him to acquire better weaponry and armor. The quest for status was a powerful motivator, driving many to take risks in pursuit of greater rewards. The irony lies in the fact that while swords symbolized status, they were also tools that could change one's status overnight through valor in battle or the spoils of war. Additionally, not all Viking warriors sought the same level of prestige. Some were content with their status and fought with what they had, while others aspired to climb the social ladder through impressive displays of bravery and skill. This pursuit of recognition created a complex social fabric within Viking society, where the worth of a warrior was often tied to the quality of their sword and the reputation they built around it. In summary, the influence of social status on sword quality within Viking society is a multifaceted issue that reveals much about their culture. While wealth and status undoubtedly provided access to better weapons, skill and bravery played equally crucial roles in determining a warrior's success. The dynamics of competition and aspiration shaped Viking warfare and society, proving that status could be both a privilege and a driving force. As we continue to explore the intricate relationship between status and weaponry, it's essential to consider how these factors interplayed in shaping the Viking legacy. Up next, we'll investigate the impact of trade networks on sword quality and how interactions with other cultures influenced Viking craftsmanship. Prepare to uncover the fascinating connections that shaped these legendary blades. How did trade affect Viking sword quality? The Vikings were not just raiders and warriors. They were also savvy traders who established extensive networks across Europe and beyond. This trade had a significant impact on their craftsmanship, particularly in the realm of sword making. How did these interactions with other cultures shape the quality of the weapons they forged? To understand this, we must first look at the vast trade routes the Vikings developed. They traversed rivers and seas, reaching as far as Byzantium in the east and the markets of the Mediterranean in the south. As they moved, they exchanged goods, ideas, and techniques with various cultures. Imagine a Viking ship laden with precious metals, spices, and exotic goods returning home. Among these treasures were not just materials, but also the knowledge of different smithing techniques that influenced their own craftsmanship. Here's an interesting fact. Many Viking swords were actually imported from renowned smiths abroad. While Viking blacksmiths were skilled in their own right, they recognized the value of importing high-quality swords from regions famous for their weaponry, like the Frankish Empire. This importation practice allowed them to incorporate superior materials and advanced techniques into their sword-making processes. It's a reminder that even the fiercest warriors needed to acknowledge the strengths of others, leading to a fusion of skills that enhanced their weaponry. One controversial point to consider is that this reliance on imported swords raises questions about the authenticity of Viking craftsmanship. Some purists may argue that using foreign swords diminishes the Viking identity in weapon making. However, the reality is that cultural exchange has always been a hallmark of human progress. By adopting and adapting foreign techniques, the Vikings were able to innovate and enhance their own sword-making traditions. A lesser-known fact is that Viking traders would often pay for goods using silver coins or even other weapons, demonstrating the value placed on quality in their economy. When a Viking warrior possessed a finely crafted sword, it signified not just personal wealth, but also a connection to the broader trading networks that sustained their society. Each weapon became a symbol of status, reflecting the intricate relationships formed through trade. As the Vikings engaged in trade, they also acquired new materials that could improve the quality of their swords. For example, trade brought them access to better iron sources and techniques for alloying metals. Some blacksmiths experimented with different mixtures to create stronger and more resilient swords. The variety of materials available allowed them to push the boundaries of what was possible in sword making. Imagine the excitement in a workshop as a blacksmith discovers a new alloy that produces a blade of unprecedented strength. Trade not only enriched their craftsmanship, but also allowed Viking warriors to remain competitive in the ever-evolving landscape of warfare. The swords they forged were not just tools of destruction. They were also a reflection of the cultural exchanges that shaped Viking identity. The interplay between trade and sword quality highlights how interconnected the Viking world was, as they drew inspiration and materials from a diverse array of cultures. Now let's consider the impact of these trade networks on the social dynamics within Viking society. The wealth generated from trade could elevate a warrior's status, allowing him to commission custom swords from the best smiths. This created a culture where the quality of a sword could symbolize a warrior's power and influence, as well as their success in trade. The connection between trade and social status was a powerful motivator for many to engage in trade expeditions. However, not all Viking swords were the result of imported materials or techniques. Some were crafted from locally sourced iron and adapted to suit the needs of specific regions. This regional variation led to distinct styles of swords, each with its own unique characteristics. The diversity in sword sword-making practices across different Viking territories highlights the creativity and adaptability of Viking craftsmen, as they use the resources available to them to forge weapons suited for their specific environments. In summary, the influence of trade on Viking sword quality is a multifaceted topic that reveals much about their society. The interactions with other cultures allowed Viking blacksmiths to enhance their craftsmanship and create weapons of remarkable quality. While the debate about the authenticity of these swords continues, it's essential to recognize the value of cultural exchange in driving innovation. The relationships formed through trade were pivotal in shaping the weapons that Vikings wielded in battle. As we continue our exploration of Viking swords, keep in mind that every blade is a product of not just the blacksmith's skill, but also the rich tapestry of trade, culture, and innovation that characterized the Viking age. We'll dive into the fascinating intersection of religion and mythology in Viking sword making, uncovering how beliefs influenced craftsmanship and added layers of significance to these legendary weapons. Prepare to discover how spirituality and artistry intertwined in the creation of Viking swords. How did beliefs influence sword making in Viking culture? The intersection of religion and craftsmanship reveals a rich tapestry of meaning that goes far beyond mere weaponry. For the Vikings, swords were not just tools for combat. They were deeply imbued with symbolism and spirituality. But how did these beliefs manifest in the very blades that warriors wielded? Viking culture was steeped in mythology, which profoundly impacted their craftsmanship. Most people think of swords as simple weapons, but the reality is that they were often seen as extensions of the warrior's identity and their connection to the divines. This cultural perspective added a layer of significance to the weapons, as they were crafted not only for functionality, but also as representations of power and protection. Imagine a sword being forged with the intention of invoking the strength of a god. This belief influenced not only how the swords were made, but also how they were perceived in battle. A strange fact that might surprise you is that some Viking swords were actually named after deities. For example, a sword could bear the name of Thor, the god of thunder, suggesting that the weapon was imbued with the strength and protection of this mighty figure. This practice highlights how intertwined their spiritual beliefs were with their daily lives, extending even to their weapons. The naming of swords after gods served as a source of motivation and fearlessness for the warrior wielding it. Here, a warrior entering battle, emboldened by the idea that he carried a piece of the divine into combat. The craftsmanship of these swords often included intricate designs that reflected their mythological roots. Many swords featured engravings or inlays that depicted scenes from Norse mythology, symbols of protection, or runes believed to possess magical properties. This decorative element was not merely for aesthetics, it added a sacred dimension to the weapon. For instance, the practice of inscribing runes was believed to invoke blessings or provide protection in battle. These inscriptions carried the weight of cultural significance, creating a connection between the sword and the spiritual beliefs of the warrior. However, this raises a controversial question. Were these beliefs just superstitions, or did they genuinely influence the effectiveness of the swords? Some might argue that the craftsmanship alone determined a sword's effectiveness, dismissing the spiritual aspect as mere folklore. But consider this: the psychological impact of belief cannot be underestimated. When a warrior feels empowered and protected by their sword, it can translate into greater confidence and performance in battle. The sword became not only a weapon, but a symbol of the warrior's resolve. Another fascinating aspect is the communal rituals surrounding sword making. Blacksmiths often held a special status within Viking society, as they were responsible for crafting these sacred weapons. The act of forging a sword was sometimes accompanied by rituals that invoked blessings from the gods. This connection between craftsmanship and spirituality made the blacksmith a pivotal figure in Viking culture. It's intriguing to think that a sword's creation was not just a technical process, but a deeply spiritual journey. Moreover, religious beliefs added a layer of significance to swords in warfare. Vikings often believed that certain swords were cursed or possessed by spirits, which could either enhance their power or lead to the downfall of their wielder. This notion created a sense of reverence and caution around these weapons. A fear of curses could lead to warriors treating their swords with an almost sacred respect, thus influencing how they engaged in battle. A lesser-known fact is that some swords were specifically crafted for ceremonial purposes. While many swords were functional weapons, others were designed for rituals and rites, further intertwining the spiritual and practical aspects of Viking life. These ceremonial swords would often be used in significant events, such as weddings or sacrifices, emphasizing the dual role of swords in Viking culture. This perspective enriches our understanding of how these weapons fit into the broader social and religious framework of Viking society. In conclusion, the role of religion and mythology in Viking sword making highlights the profound connection between craftsmanship and spirituality. Swords were not just practical tools, they were vessels of cultural significance, imbued with beliefs that shaped the identity of the warrior and the society they belonged to. As we explore the legacy of these legendary weapons, remember that each blade tells a story, one that intertwines the art of sword making with the rich mythology of the Viking world. As we continue our journey through the fascinating history of Viking swords, prepare to delve into how the quality of these weapons evolved over time and how external influences impacted their craftsmanship. Get ready to uncover the reasons behind the decline of Viking sword quality in the face of changing technologies and trade dynamics. Why did the quality of Viking swords change over time? The evolution of sword making in Viking culture is a fascinating tale of innovation, adaptation, and the impact of external forces. As we delve into this subject, we'll uncover the reasons behind the shift in sword quality, from the heights of craftsmanship to the challenges that led to a decline. With the arrival of new technologies, sword making evolved dramatically. Most people think of the Viking Age as a time of unyielding warriors brandishing unmatched weapons, but the reality is that changes in technology significantly affected how swords were crafted and utilized. This evolution often came from the incorporation of techniques and materials from other cultures. For example, as contact with the Franks and other European societies increased, Viking blacksmiths began to adopt and adapt new metallurgical techniques. These exchanges led to a broader understanding of alloying and heat treatment, significantly impacting sword quality. A strange fact that might surprise you is that by the late Viking Age, many swords began to exhibit a certain degree of mass production, which was unusual for a culture known for its highly personalized and intricately crafted weapons. This shift suggests a change in focus from unique high-quality swords to more standardized production methods aimed at meeting the needs of a growing population of warriors. As demand surged, the emphasis on craftsmanship often gave way to quantity, resulting in varying degrees of quality. Trade routes also played a crucial role in this decline. As Viking raids expanded and their trading networks developed, blacksmiths had access to a wider variety of materials. While this could have enriched their craftsmanship, it also meant that the reliance on foreign materials sometimes compromised the integrity of the swords. The introduction of lower quality iron or steel could lead to inconsistencies in sword performance. Many swords were made using materials that were not ideally suited for weaponry, impacting their effectiveness in battle. As Viking raids began to decline in the late 11th century, so did the need for superior swords. The reduction in warfare led to a change in demand. Fewer elite warriors needed bespoke weapons. Many blacksmiths who once prided themselves on crafting exceptional swords found their skills less in demand. As a result, some turned to other forms of craftsmanship, leading to a loss of expertise in sword-making techniques. This decline in demand for swords contributed to the reduction in quality, as blacksmiths were no longer incentivized to perfect their craft. Another fascinating aspect of this decline is the adaptation of Viking swords to different forms of warfare. As battles evolved, so too did the design of swords. Some blacksmiths began creating weapons better suited for specific combat styles or tactics. For instance, the rise of cavalry in some regions necessitated the creation of lighter, faster swords, which often meant sacrificing the robust qualities of earlier blades. This adaptation highlights how the needs of the battlefield directly influenced the quality and design of swords, sometimes at the cost of their traditional craftsmanship. Moreover, there were significant shifts in social structures that also influenced sword making. With the rise of a more centralized authority in many regions, the old warrior elite who prized unique and powerful swords began to be replaced by a broader class of soldiers. This new military class often had less access to high-quality weaponry and relied on cheaper, mass-produced swords. The shift in social hierarchy affected the distribution of resources and knowledge about sword making, further contributing to a decline in quality. A little-known fact is that Viking society was not monolithic. It was diverse and constantly evolving. As different cultures and peoples integrated into the Viking world, their influences reshaped the sword-making tradition. This fusion sometimes led to unique designs and materials, but could also dilute the standards of craftsmanship that had previously defined Viking swords. The merging of various styles and techniques meant that not all swords retained the same level of quality, contributing to the perception that Viking swords were declining in excellence. In summary, the decline of Viking sword quality can be attributed to several interrelated factors: technological evolution, changing trade dynamics, reduced demand due to fewer conflicts, and shifts in social structures. As we continue to unravel the fascinating history of Viking swords, we will explore their effectiveness in battle and how these legendary weapons shaped the outcomes of countless conflicts. Get ready to discover the true impact of these iconic blades on Viking warfare and beyond. What was the true effectiveness of Viking swords in combat? Most people envision Viking warriors as fierce, unstoppable forces, charging into battle with their legendary swords at the ready. But the reality is more complex and fascinating than that. Viking swords were not just weapons. They were tools designed for specific combat situations, each with its unique strengths and weaknesses. One striking fact that may surprise you is that Viking swords were primarily designed for slashing and thrusting, making them versatile in battle. This adaptability allowed Viking warriors to switch tactics depending on the situation, whether facing off against heavily armored foes or engaging in swift skirmishes. The combination of these two techniques gave Viking fighters an edge in many combat scenarios. You might think that swords were all about brute strength, but precision and technique often played a much more significant role in Viking warfare. To truly appreciate the effectiveness of Viking swords, we must look at their construction and design. Historical accounts reveal that Viking swords were often crafted with a balance of weight and length, typically around 30 to 36 inches. This length made them suitable for a range of combat styles. A sword that was too heavy would tire the wielder, while one that was too light could lack the necessary force in a strike. Viking blacksmiths mastered the art of creating blades that struck a balance between these competing needs. Another important aspect is the way Viking swords were used in conjunction with shields. The iconic Viking round shield was not just a defensive tool, it was part of a dynamic combat style. Viking warriors would often use their swords in a coordinated manner with their shields, blocking strikes and countering with slashes or thrusts. This interplay between sword and shield allowed for greater protection and enhanced offensive capability, making the Viking fighter a formidable opponent on the battlefield. But how did these swords perform in actual battles? Historical accounts, including sagas and chronicles, provide us with insights. For example, during raids across Europe, Viking warriors often faced adversaries who were well prepared and equipped. Accounts from battles against the Saxons and other cultures reveal that while Viking swords were effective, they were not invincible. The tales of battles often emphasized the importance of strategy, terrain, and the experience of the warriors wielding the sword. An intriguing controversy is that despite the famous reputation of Viking swords, many of the swords used in battle were not of the highest quality. A significant number of weapons were made using lower quality materials or were poorly constructed, leading to questions about their reliability in combat. The famed Ulfberht swords, for instance, are legendary for their quality, but not every Viking had access to such superior weaponry. This reality challenges the notion that every Viking sword was a top-tier weapon, pushing viewers to reconsider the romanticized view of Viking warriors. Additionally, there's a lesser-known fact that Viking swords were sometimes inscribed with runes or symbols, which were believed to provide protection or enhance the sword's effectiveness. This mystical approach to sword-making reflects the deep connection between Viking culture, warfare, and their spiritual beliefs. Such inscriptions are not merely decorative, they indicate a warrior's status and beliefs, adding layers of meaning to the weapon beyond its physical capabilities. In terms of battlefield effectiveness, the actual outcomes often depended on the training and skill of the individual warrior. Historical texts indicate that Vikings underwent rigorous training from a young age, focusing not just on strength but also on techniques that maximized the sword's potential. This emphasis on skill over sheer power illustrates the complexity of Viking warfare, where knowledge and technique were just as important as the weapon itself. As we analyze the role of Viking swords in battle, we cannot overlook their impact on Viking tactics. The design of the sword and the combat strategies employed were heavily influenced by the changing nature of warfare. As conflicts evolved and new enemies emerged, Viking warriors adapted their techniques, leading to a diversification in the types of swords and combat styles used. For instance, when engaging mounted foes, a thrusting sword could be more advantageous than a slashing weapon, indicating the adaptability of Viking warriors. In conclusion, the effectiveness of Viking swords in combat is a multifaceted topic that intertwines weapon design, combat techniques, and the cultural context of Viking warfare. As we explore further, we'll uncover how these legendary blades shape the tactics and outcomes of battles throughout the Viking Age, revealing the true legacy of these iconic weapons in history. Get ready to delve into the world of Viking combat and discover how these swords forged not just a path through history, but also the identity of a warrior culture. How do Viking swords stack up against other cultures' weapons? Most people envision Viking swords as the pinnacle of craftsmanship, but the reality is far more nuanced. While Viking swords were certainly impressive, they existed within a broader context of global sword making that included a range of fascinating techniques and materials from other cultures. Consider this. Did you know that the term sword encompasses a vast array of weapon types from different cultures? From the straight-edged katana of Japan to the curved scimitar of the Middle East, swords were crafted to meet specific combat needs and cultural preferences. Viking swords were no exception, yet they represented just one style among many. Viking swords were often compared to Roman gladii, the short swords favored by Roman soldiers. The gladius was designed for thrusting in tight formations, making it incredibly effective in close combat. In contrast, Viking swords typically had longer blades suited for slashing attacks. This fundamental difference in design highlights how each culture adapted their weapons for their unique combat scenarios. Additionally, Viking swords, like the famous Ulfberht, are renowned for their exceptional quality, which was achieved through advanced metallurgy for their times. The Ulfberht swords, with their distinctive inscriptions, were made from high-quality steel that was not widely available, giving them a reputation that has lasted through the centuries. However, this quality was not universal among all Viking swords. Many were crafted from lesser materials and were of varying quality. It's also interesting to note that Celtic swords, known for their artistic design and functional form, often featured intricate patterns and sometimes had ceremonial significance. These swords were frequently made from iron and bronze, showcasing the technological capabilities of Celtic smiths. The emphasis on artistic expression in Celtic sword-making contrasts with the Viking focus on utility and strength, highlighting differing cultural values. Another noteworthy comparison can be made with the swords of the Islamic Golden Age. Curved scimitars of the Middle Eastern warriors were expertly designed for mounted combat, allowing for swift slashing motions while riding. The design of the scimitar showcases how geography and warfare styles influenced sword making. In contrast, Viking swords swords were typically straight, making them ideal for both foot soldiers and infantry combat scenarios. While examining the global sword-making landscape, it's also important to consider how the Vikings adopted and adapted techniques from their interactions with other cultures. The Viking raids and trade routes allowed them to gather not only resources, but also knowledge of sword-making from places like Byzantium and the Middle East. This cultural exchange led to the evolution of their own sword designs over time, blending various influences into their weaponry. Now let's touch on a somewhat controversial topic: the idea that Viking swords were purely tools of war. In reality, swords held significant cultural and symbolic meanings for the Vikings. They were often seen as status symbols, passed down through generations and imbued with personal and familial significance. The notion that a sword was just a weapon overlooks the profound connection Vikings had with their swords as representations of honor and heritage. Interestingly, the craftsmanship behind swords also varied greatly among different cultures. For instance, the craftsmanship of the Japanese katana involved a meticulous folding process that produced blades with extraordinary strength and flexibility. The samurai's katana is not just a weapon but an art form in itself, revered for its beauty as well as its functionality. In contrast, while Viking swords were expertly crafted, the focus was more on battle readiness than on artistic beauty. This distinction can lead to differing opinions on what constitutes a superior sword. As we explore these comparisons further, we find that Viking swords excelled in their intended contexts. Their robust design made them effective in the type of warfare common in Scandinavia and beyond. The combination of slashing and thrusting capabilities provided versatility on the battlefield, making them formidable weapons against various foes. In conclusion, while Viking swords are undoubtedly remarkable, they exist within a rich tapestry of global sword-making traditions. Understanding these comparisons with other cultures enhances our appreciation for the Viking sword not only as a weapon, but also as a reflection of the societal values and technological advancements of its time. Each culture's sword tells a story, and Viking swords are no exception. As we continue to delve into the intricacies of Viking craftsmanship, we uncover not just the legacy of their blades, but the profound impact these weapons had on shaping history and identity in the Viking world. What remains of Viking sword making today? The legacy of Viking swords is not just a relic of the past. It is a living tradition that continues to influence modern craftsmanship. Most people think of Viking swords as artifacts locked away in museums, but the reality is much more dynamic. Today, the skills, techniques, and cultural significance of these blades resonate in various aspects of our contemporary world. The craftsmanship of Viking swords has found its way into modern sword making, where artisans draw inspiration from the methods used by their Viking ancestors. One striking example is the ongoing practice of pattern welding, a technique that involves layering iron and steel to create beautiful, functional blades. This method not only enhances the strength of the sword, but also creates mesmerizing patterns that tell a story of artistry and skill. Interestingly, modern bladesmiths often share a kinship with their Viking predecessors, using similar tools and techniques to produce contemporary interpretations of ancient designs. A rare fact is that historical reenactors play a significant role in preserving Viking sword-making traditions. These enthusiasts dive deep into the historical context, studying ancient texts and artifacts to replicate authentic Viking swords. Many of them have formed communities dedicated to sharing knowledge about Viking craftsmanship. At reenactments, you can see them wielding swords that reflect the ancient techniques, providing a living demonstration of how these weapons were used in their times. This commitment to authenticity not only honors the past, but also educates new generations about Viking history and culture. Moreover, museums around the world showcase Viking swords, providing insights into their design, use, and cultural significance. The way these swords are displayed tells a narrative that connects viewers to the Viking Age. From the fearsome Ulfberht blades to ceremonial weapons, each piece provides a glimpse into the warrior culture that prized strength and honor. The legacy of these swords is often highlighted in exhibitions that explore the intersection of history, art, and technology. Another interesting aspect of this legacy is the influence of Viking swords in popular culture. Films, video games, and literature frequently draw upon the imagery of Viking warriors wielding their iconic blades. This representation often sparks a fascination with the Viking era, leading to renewed interest in Viking history and craftsmanship. For instance, series like Vikings and video games such as Assassin's Creed Valhalla portray the swords as symbols of power and bravery, while also showcasing the rich tapestry of Norse mythology and culture. While the allure of Viking swords remains strong, there's also a discussion to be had about their historical representation. Some argue that modern interpretations romanticize the Viking warrior culture, overshadowing the complexities of their society and the darker aspects of their history, including raiding and conquest. This debate pushes us to think critically about how history is portrayed and remembered in contemporary narratives. Despite these complexities, the fascination with Viking sword-making endures. Workshops and courses are increasingly available for those interested in blacksmithing, allowing individuals to learn the art of sword-making directly. This revival of interest in traditional skills speaks to a broader movement valuing handcrafted artistry in a world dominated by mass production. Many contemporary smiths strive to recreate not only the aesthetic qualities of Viking swords, but also to capture the spirit of craftsmanship that defined the Viking Age. As we delve deeper into this topic, it becomes clear that Viking sword making is not simply a historical pursuit. It's a vibrant tradition that continues to evolve. The blend of ancient techniques and modern innovation creates a dialogue between past and present, allowing us to appreciate the craftsmanship that has stood the test of time. The legacy of Viking swords also extends to the academic realm. Scholars continue to research and analyze the metallurgy and construction of these blades, employing advanced techniques like X-ray fluorescence and scanning electron microscopy. These studies not only uncover the secrets of Viking sword making, but also contribute to our understanding of the broader technological advancements of the period. In conclusion, the legacy of Viking sword making is multifaceted, intertwining craftsmanship, cultural significance, and modern interpretation. From historical reenactments to contemporary smithing, the fascination with these iconic weapons keeps the spirit of the Viking Age alive. As we continue to explore the impact of Viking swords on our culture and craftsmanship today, we realize that their story is far from over. Each sword tells a tale that transcends time, connecting us to the past while inspiring future generations of artisans and historians. Which Viking swords became legendary? Many people think that all Viking swords were the same, but the reality is that some swords became iconic due to their quality and the stories behind them. Let's explore the fascinating world of famous Viking swords and the unique tales that accompany them. One of the most renowned swords is the Ulfberht. These legendary blades are often considered the pinnacle of Viking sword making. Crafted between the 9th and 11th centuries, Ulfberht swords were known for their exceptional quality, which was largely due to their high carbon content. Interestingly, the name Ulfberht was not just a brand, but also an indication of superior craftsmanship. These swords were often inscribed with the name, which is believed to be that of a skilled smith or workshop. The fact that the inscription itself became a hallmark of quality reflects how important reputation was in Viking society. However, a curious fact is that not all Ulfberht swords were genuine. Counterfeit versions existed, showcasing the high demand for these blades. This raises an intriguing question. Why would someone go to the trouble of forging a fake Ulfberht sword? The answer lies in the status associated with wielding such a prestigious weapon. In a society where honor and reputation were paramount, having a genuine Ulfberht sword could elevate a warrior's standing in the eyes of their peers. Another fascinating sword from the Viking Age is the Sword of Kings. This name is often associated with several swords believed to have belonged to prominent historical figures. While the exact swords may be lost to history, the legends surrounding them endure. For instance, the sword of King Harald Fairhair is said to have been an incredible weapon that helped him unite Norway. This association with leadership and power makes such swords legendary not just for their physical attributes, but for the stories of conquest and leadership that they symbolize. An often overlooked fact is that Viking swords were not just tools of war. They held ceremonial significance as well. Many swords were buried with their owners, indicating their importance in both life and death. This practice is particularly fascinating because it suggests that swords served not only as weapons, but also as a way to convey status and identity, even in the afterlife. The intricate designs on the blades often told stories of the owner's achievements, victories, and lineage, enhancing their legendary status. Let's not forget about the Sverder, a term that refers to a type of Viking sword that was often bestowed upon heroes or warriors as a sign of recognition. Such swords typically bore intricate carvings and were sometimes adorned with precious metals, making them both weapons and works of art. This highlights a critical aspect of Viking culture, the intertwining of art and functionality. These swords were not only meant for battle, they were a symbol of a warrior's valor and craftsmanship. While these legendary swords are celebrated, it's essential to recognize that not every Viking was fortunate enough to wield such high-quality weapons. Warriors fought with simpler swords or axes, emphasizing the class distinctions within Viking society. This brings us to a somewhat controversial point. While the Viking Age is often romanticized, the reality is that access to superior weaponry was limited and often dictated by social status. As we continue to explore these remarkable weapons, we find that the stories and legacies of these swords have transcended time. Many modern smiths strive to replicate the craftsmanship of legendary Viking swords, paying homage to the artisans of the past. By studying the techniques used in sword making, they keep the spirit of Viking craftsmanship alive, showing how these historical blades continue to inspire and captivate enthusiasts today. In summary, the legacy of famous Viking swords is not only about their physical attributes, but also about the rich stories they tell. From the Ulfberht, which represents unparalleled craftsmanship, to the ceremonial swords that reflect the social dynamics of the Viking Age, these blades are woven into the fabric of history. They challenge our perceptions of Viking society, revealing a complex culture that valued artistry, status, and storytelling through their weapons. As we delve deeper into the lives of these legendary swords, we uncover not only their significance in battle, but also their enduring impact on our understanding of Viking heritage. What does modern science say about Viking swords? Most people think that the craftsmanship of Viking swords is just a story told through historical accounts, but the reality is that modern technology has unveiled many truths about these legendary weapons that we may never have known otherwise. In recent years, advances in metallurgical science have allowed researchers to closely analyze Viking swords. This scientific scrutiny has revealed that many Viking blades, particularly the famed Ulfberht swords, were made from high-quality steel with an impressive carbon content. This means they were not only incredibly durable but also more flexible than many of their contemporaries. Interestingly, the presence of carbon is what differentiates true steel from iron, and the ability of Viking smiths to manipulate this ratio was a significant factor in the performance of their swords. What's even more fascinating is that some Viking swords were made using a technique known as crucible steel production, which is quite rare for the times. This process allowed the smiths to create a more homogeneous steel that possessed greater resilience and sharpness. However, only a few smiths had the skill to master this technique, making these swords exceedingly valuable and sought after. The rarity of these swords raises a curious question. How did the Vikings acquire such advanced knowledge about metallurgy? Research indicates that this expertise may have been influenced by interactions with other cultures. As Vikings traveled and traded with civilizations like the Arabs, they may have absorbed advanced metallurgical techniques. This cultural exchange helped elevate the quality of Viking weaponry, making them formidable in battle. A strange yet interesting fact is that some Viking swords were found to contain traces of manganese. This element, typically found in higher quality steel, suggests that Viking blacksmiths were not only skilled artisans but also innovators who experimented with materials to enhance their weapons. This revelation contradicts the notion that Viking swords were simply brute force weapons. Rather, they were the products of thoughtful experimentation and adaptation. Another noteworthy aspect is the scientific analysis of sword patterns. Many Viking swords feature distinctive patterns on their blades, a result of techniques like pattern welding. This method involved layering different types of iron and steel, then folding and hammering them together. The result was not just a strong blade, but also one with unique aesthetic patterns. Reenactment techniques have allowed scientists to analyze these patterns, providing insights into the specific techniques used by individual smiths and even indicating regional styles. A little-known fact about Viking swords is that some of the metal used to forge them likely came from meteorites. Researchers have identified nickel in certain blades, which is a hallmark of meteoric iron. This rare material would have added both mystique and value to these weapons, linking the warriors who wielded them to the cosmos in a way that few other artifacts could. So what does all this mean for our understanding of Viking craftsmanship? It reveals a culture that was not only skilled in warfare, but also in the sciences of materials and metallurgy. This complex relationship between functionality and artistry in swordmaking reflects a society that valued both performance in battle and the beauty of craftsmanship. As we conclude this section, it's clear that Viking swords were much more than just tools of war. They were symbols of innovation, craftsmanship, and a deep understanding of materials that rivals even modern standards. The legacy of these swords continues to inform modern metallurgy and weapon making, proving that the Vikings were not merely raiders, but pioneers in their craft. This connection between ancient techniques and modern science demonstrates that there is still much to learn from the masters of Viking swordmaking. Did women play a role in crafting swords? Most people think of Viking blacksmiths as exclusively male, but the reality is that women significantly contributed to Viking craftsmanship, often working alongside men in the forge or producing essential components for swordmaking. In Viking society, the roles of women were more dynamic than many historical narratives suggest. While it is true that men typically held the title of blacksmith, evidence indicates that women were also skilled artisans. Some were responsible for tasks such as smelting, shaping, and even engraving swords. This involvement challenges our traditional understanding of gender roles in Viking culture, opening the door to a richer narrative of their society. Imagine this: the next time you think of a Viking blacksmith hammering away at metal, consider that a woman might have been just as likely to be wielding the hammer. Archaeological findings suggest that in certain Viking settlements, women participated in various aspects of metallurgy. One intriguing example involves a woman named Gunhild, who was not just a blacksmith, but also a respected leader. Her story illustrates that women could be both skilled tradespeople and significant figures in their communities. An interesting fact to ponder is that in some Viking cultures, women were known to inherit and manage land and resources, which could include the tools and materials necessary for swordmaking. This access allowed them to engage directly in crafting high-quality weapons, ensuring that their skills were not only recognized but essential to their society's survival. Furthermore, the tools used in blacksmithing were often seen as communal resources, shared among family and clan members, which further emphasizes the collaborative nature of craft production. However, the historical narrative often overlooks these contributions. This is partly due to the prevailing male-centric accounts of Viking history, which have dominated scholarship for centuries. The idea that craftsmanship and the artistry of swordmaking were solely male endeavors has perpetuated the notion that women played little to no role in these processes. Yet as modern historians and archaeologists delve deeper into the Viking Age, they are uncovering evidence that paints a more inclusive picture. One particularly fascinating discovery comes from a gravesite in Norway, where archaeologists found weapons alongside female remains. This suggests that women not only had access to weaponry, but may have been warriors themselves. themselves. The implications of this discovery challenge the stereotype of the passive Viking woman and highlight the potential for women to have held roles as both artisans and fighters. The involvement of women in sword making also resonates with the spiritual and symbolic aspects of Viking culture. Swords were often named after goddesses or associated with feminine qualities, reflecting the belief that women played an integral part in the spiritual landscape of Viking society. Some blades were even thought to possess protective qualities, linking them to divine femininity. A little-known fact is that the craftsmanship of Viking swords often included intricate designs that depicted various deities and mythical creatures, many of which were feminine figures. This artistic expression not only showcases the skills of the craftsman, but also emphasizes the importance of female symbolism in Viking culture. The intertwining of craftsmanship and mythology suggests that women's roles extended beyond the forge, influencing the cultural significance of the weapons themselves. As we explore the role of women in Viking sword making, it's essential to recognize the evolving perception of gender roles in historical context. By reassessing the narratives that have traditionally marginalized women's contributions, we gain a more nuanced understanding of Viking society as a whole. This perspective enriches our appreciation of their culture, illustrating that Viking women were not merely bystanders but active participants in the shaping of their world. In conclusion, the legacy of women in Viking sword making challenges the long-held assumptions about gender roles in history. Their contributions remind us that craftsmanship, artistry, and strength were not confined to a single gender. The stories of women like Gunhild and the discoveries of graves with weapons emphasize that Viking culture was a collaborative society where both men and women forged the tools of their legacy. Understanding this intricate tapestry of roles not only reshapes our view of the past, but also informs our appreciation for the complexities of craftsmanship in any era. How do reenactors keep the Viking sword-making tradition alive? Many enthusiasts practice historical sword-making techniques today, passionately preserving the craftsmanship that defined an era. But what drives this revival of ancient skills? Imagine standing in a field with the sound of clashing swords echoing around you, as skilled reenactors don authentic Viking attire and demonstrate the art of sword-making and combat. This scene isn't just for show, it's part of a dedicated effort to connect with the past, bringing history to life for both participants and spectators alike. Reenactors often immerse themselves in research, striving for authenticity in every detail, from the materials used to the techniques employed. They understand that each sword tells a story, a testament to the craftsmanship and culture of the Vikings. In modern reenactments, the Viking sword holds a significant place, not just as a weapon, but as a symbol of heritage. Surprisingly, many of these reenactors have become adept craftsmen themselves, mastering techniques passed down through generations or learned through rigorous study. The practice of sword making is not merely a hobby for them. It is a way to honor the traditions of their ancestors and preserve historical knowledge. One intriguing fact is that some reenactors even use the same materials and methods that Vikings would have used centuries ago. This dedication to authenticity means sourcing bog iron and employing traditional smelting techniques, providing a direct link to the past. This approach challenges the misconception that history is merely academic. Instead, it reveals a living, breathing culture that continues to evolve. However, not all reenactors are solely focused on the craft. Many engage in combat demonstrations, showcasing the effectiveness of Viking swords in battle. Through this hands-on experience, they gain a deeper understanding of the balance, weight, and functionality of these weapons, allowing them to appreciate the craftsmanship in a new light. They often emphasize that sword making is only one part of a larger narrative. Understanding how these swords were wielded in battle is equally important. This revival of interest in ancient craftsmanship isn't just about nostalgia. It serves a broader purpose. In a world dominated by technology and mass production, many people find solace and meaning in the tactile experience of creating something by hand. Engaging with traditional crafts offers a way to disconnect from the digital age and reconnect with history, community, and self. Interestingly, many historical reenactment groups also participate in public events and educational programs, aiming to spread awareness about Viking history and culture. They encourage attendees to get involved, often offering workshops on sword making, crafting, and even combat techniques. This hands-on approach not only preserves the craft, but also inspires a new generation of history enthusiasts. Despite their dedication, these reenactors face challenges. There is often a tension between the desire for authenticity and the constraints of modern regulations, especially regarding the use of weapons in public demonstrations. Moreover, as with any tradition, there is the question of how to keep it relevant in an ever-changing world. Some reenactors adapt by blending traditional methods with contemporary storytelling techniques, ensuring that the Viking legacy remains vibrant and engaging. An unexpected twist in this narrative is the increasing interest in Viking culture due to popular media, such as movies and television shows. While this has brought more attention to the Viking Age, it has also led to debates about historical accuracy versus creative license. Reenactors often find themselves in a unique position, acting as both ambassadors of history and critics of its portrayals in modern media. They emphasize the importance of distinguishing between myth and reality, ensuring that the true essence of Viking craftsmanship is not lost in sensationalized representations. As we explore the the impact of modern reenactments on Viking swordmaking, it's clear that this movement is about much more than swords. It's about community, connection, and the human desire to understand our past. The legacy of Viking swordmaking is alive and well, carried forth by those who refuse to let history fade into obscurity. In conclusion, the role of modern reenactors in preserving Viking swordmaking traditions highlights the intersection of history and craft. Their passion and commitment not only keep the spirit of the Vikings alive, but also foster a deeper appreciation for the skills and artistry that defined an era. By engaging with history in such an immersive way, these enthusiasts remind us that the past is not just a series of events, but a rich tapestry of stories, skills, and cultural legacies waiting to be explored and celebrated. How have Viking swords influenced movies and games? You might think of Viking swords as mere props, but their presence on screen and in play is a fascinating reflection of our fascination with Norse culture and mythology. Viking swords, with their legendary status, often appear as symbols of strength and heroism in popular media. Whether it's a character wielding a massive sword in a blockbuster film, or a warrior in a video game battling mythical beasts, these weapons evoke a sense of power that resonates deeply with audiences. But did you know that many of these portrayals are influenced by a mix of historical accuracy and creative license? In films and television, Viking swords are frequently depicted as larger-than-life artifacts, infused with magical properties or extraordinary strength. This portrayal can lead viewers to believe that Viking warriors wielded superhuman weapons. In reality, while Viking swords were expertly crafted, they were not invincible. A lesser-known fact is that actual Viking swords were often handmade and varied widely in quality. This inconsistency doesn't often translate to screen portrayals, where a singular image of a powerful sword dominates. Interestingly, the popularity of Viking swords in pop culture has also led to a revival of interest in Viking history itself. Movies like The 13th Warrior and series such as Vikings have sparked curiosity, prompting viewers to delve deeper into the true stories behind these weapons. However, it's essential to recognize that while these adaptations can inspire learning, they can also perpetuate myths. For instance, many people think of Vikings as savage raiders. The reality is that they were also traders, explorers, and settlers. Video games too capitalize on the allure of Viking swords. Titles like Assassin's Creed Valhalla immerse players in Norse mythology, allowing them to wield swords and engage in epic battles. The designs of these weapons in games often take artistic liberties, showcasing exaggerated features that emphasize their power and beauty. It's captivating to see how game developers interpret these historical artifacts, but this can sometimes overshadow the historical realities. For example, while swords like the Ulfberht are renowned for their craftsmanship, video games may depict them with fantastical enhancements that didn't exist in reality. Moreover, Viking swords in popular culture often reflect our contemporary values and ideals. They symbolize courage, honor, and adventure, qualities that resonate with audiences today. However, some critics argue that this romanticized view can detract from the harsh realities of Viking life. For instance, the actual experience of Viking warriors involved much more than glorious battles. It included hardships, treachery, and survivals. A strange yet revealing fact is that some modern swordsmiths draw inspiration from the designs seen in movies and games, attempting to recreate the legendary swords they see on screen. This creates a cyclical relationship where pop culture influences craftsmanship, and in turn, these crafted swords fuel the imagination of storytellers. As a result, what starts as entertainment can inspire a new generation of craftsmen dedicated to the art of swordmaking. As we examine the impact of Viking swords on modern media, we must also consider the responsibility of filmmakers and game developers. Power to shape public perception, they have an opportunity to educate and inspire while still entertaining. By incorporating more accurate depictions of Viking culture and craftsmanship, they can enrich the narrative and provide viewers with a more nuanced understanding of history. Interestingly, Viking swords have also become a popular motif in contemporary art, symbolizing not just war but also cultural identity. Artists today are exploring the significance of these weapons beyond their historical context, interpreting them as emblems of resilience and heritage. This artistic exploration fosters a dialogue about our past and how it continues to shape our present. In conclusion, Viking swords are more than just weapons. They are cultural icons that embody the spirit of an era. Through their portrayal in movies and games, we see a blend of history, myth, and artistic interpretation. As audiences, we are invited to engage with these narratives, allowing us to reflect on the values they represent and the truths they may obscure. The influence of Viking swords on popular culture not only highlights our fascination with the past, but also challenges us to understand and appreciate the complexities of history as it unfolds in our modern world. What goes into restoring ancient Viking swords? While many might think of restoration as merely cleaning and polishing, the reality is far more intricate and fascinating. The process of restoring Viking swords is a meticulous journey that begins with understanding the original craftsmanship. Experts in this field study the swords to analyze their materials and construction technique. For instance, a sword made from high-carbon steel may require different treatment than one crafted from iron. Did you know that some ancient swords have intricate patterns that were formed through a technique called pattern welding? This technique not only adds to the sword's beauty, but also influences influences how it is restored. A curious aspect of sword restoration is the need to maintain authenticity while making necessary repairs. For instance, if a sword has a broken hilt, the restorer must decide whether to create a new hilt that matches the original style or to replicate the existing design using modern materials. This decision can spark heated debates among historians and artisans. Some argue for strict adherence to original materials, while others believe that modern advancements can enhance longevity without compromising authenticity. As we delve deeper, we discover that the restoration process is not merely technical, it also holds significant historical value. Restorers often uncover stories behind these artifacts that can reshape our understanding of Viking culture. Each sword has its own unique narrative, revealing insights into the life of its owner or the battles it may have witnessed. For example, a sword found in a burial site may indicate the social status of the warrior it belonged to, as higher status individuals often had access to better weapons. An interesting fact to consider is that some swords were intentionally damaged before burial. This was done as a form of offering or sacrifice, a practice that challenges our modern perceptions of value and reverence. It raises the question, how do restorers approach these artifacts that have been altered with intent? This adds another layer of complexity to the restoration process, as it becomes crucial to respect the historical context while preserving the sword's integrity. Restoration is also a deeply collaborative effort, often involving a team of specialists. From metallurgists who analyze the composition of the blade to artisans who recreate missing parts, each restoration project draws on a wide range of expertise. This collaborative nature of restoration is a striking reminder of how history connects us today. The skills and knowledge shared in these teams reflect the very same craftsmanship that was prevalent in Viking society. In a captivating twist, modern technology is revolutionizing the way restorers work. Techniques such as 3D scanning and printing enable experts to create exact replicas of damaged parts. This not only aids in restoration but also provides a template for future restorations. However, this raises another question. At what point does a restored sword become a reproduction rather than an artifact? The line between authenticity and innovation can often blur, leading to vibrant discussions within the community. Perhaps one of the most compelling aspects of sword restoration is the emotional journey involved. For many restorers, bringing a sword back to life is akin to reuniting a lost part of history with its rightful place in the world. The moment a sword is completed, it's not just a restoration, it's a revival of a story that had been silent for centuries. As we reflect on this intricate process, it's evident that restoring Viking swords is more than a technical endeavor. It's a celebration of history, a revival of craftsmanship, and a continuous dialogue between the past and the present. The swords tell tales that deserve to be heard, and through restoration, we keep those tales alive for future generations. By the end of this section, it's clear that the journey of restoring ancient Viking swords encapsulates both the art of craftsmanship and the importance of preserving history. As you continue to learn about Viking culture, consider the stories that lie behind each artifact, waiting to be uncovered and celebrated. The restoration process not only breathes new life into these historic weapons, but also enriches our understanding of the people who once wielded them. What's next for research on Viking swords? Most people think that our understanding of Viking craftsmanship has peaked, but the reality is that we are just scratching the surface. Recent advancements in technology have opened up exciting new avenues for Viking sword studies. For instance, researchers now use laser scanning to create detailed 3D models of artifacts, allowing for analysis without the risk of damaging the original pieces. This non-invasive technology reveals minute details that were previously hidden from view. Did you know that some Viking swords have unique metallurgical signatures that can trace their origins to specific smiths or regions? This kind of forensic science could revolutionize our understanding of trade networks and craftsmanship. As we dive deeper into the past, we find that historical records and archaeological evidence often tell conflicting stories. For example, while certain Viking swords are celebrated for their quality, recent finds suggest that many swords were actually mass-produced and lack the intricate craftsmanship we associate with Viking weaponry. This challenges the traditional narrative of the individual craftsman as the heart of Viking sword making and raises questions about the role of workshops and assembly lines in the Viking Age. Moreover, ongoing archaeological digs continue to uncover new sites and artifacts, each telling their own stories. In Norway, a significant find was made when researchers uncovered a burial site containing multiple swords alongside other grave goods. This discovery has led historians to reconsider the social practices surrounding sword ownership and usage in Viking culture. What does it mean for a warrior to be buried with multiple weapons? What stories do these choices tell us about status and honor in Viking society? One of the most surprising facts emerging from recent studies is that many Viking swords show signs of having been repurposed. A sword might have been broken in battle, only to be reforged into a new blade or even a tool. This practice speaks to a resourcefulness that many might not associate with the so-called barbaric Vikings. It also reflects their cultural values, where every item was seen as having potential value beyond its original purpose. Looking forward, scholars are excited about the implications of interdisciplinary research that combines history, archaeology, and materials science. As scientists analyze the composition composition of these ancient weapons, they are discovering how changes in materials and techniques impacted the functionality of swords over time. It's a reminder that sword making was not static. It evolved in response to warfare needs, resource availability, and cultural exchanges with neighboring civilizations. The future of Viking sword research is not just about individual artifacts, but also about understanding the broader cultural and social contexts in which these swords were made and used. As more specialists collaborate across disciplines, we may start to piece together a more nuanced view of Viking society, one that encompasses not only warriors and their weapons, but also the craftsmen, trade networks, and beliefs that shape their Finally, public interest in Viking culture continues to grow, thanks in part to films, TV series, and video games that portray this fascinating era. This interest can drive funding and support for archaeological projects and scholarly research, helping to uncover even more secrets about Viking swords and their makers. By the end of this exploration, you'll understand that the future of Viking sword studies is not just about the past, it's about how we engage with that past in our present. Each new discovery brings us one step closer to understanding not only the craftsmanship of these iconic weapons, but also the lives of the people who wielded them. If you enjoyed this epic journey, please subscribe to our channel for more thrilling historical tales. Don't miss out on new videos. Hit the notification bell to stay updated.